What
And
do you make of? My website has a climate page, which is actually possibly the most comprehensive now in Britain, because I've been building it for some years, and I was on the climate affairs, the Environment Affairs Committee when I was in the EU. I was not the most popular member, incidentally, but it is the hypothesis that man-made carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is so hopeless that a child of 10 could take it to pieces. And I've got all the graphics on my website. I've gone through the Minoan warm period. I've gone through the Roman warm period, the medieval warm period, the mini ice age, and so it goes on. There is no correlation between atmospheric CO2 and weather and climate, and there never has been. And when I sat on the committee, I offered a prize. There are over 10,000 researchers, that's lobbyists, 10,000 lobbyists and about 7,000 researchers when I was in office. And I put up a prize of a case of quite decent champagne for any researcher from any party in any country who would show me a correlation, a long-term correlation between atmospheric carbon dioxide and climate. Nobody won the prize because there isn't any. There just isn't any. And yet, when he was the Prince of Wales and he came to talk to me, talk to our committee, which is quite a small environment, we weren't allowed to ask any questions or anything of him. He came, he delivered, and he pissed off. He is not allowed. So one might assume that the reason he perhaps doesn't know anything is because he is not prepared to listen to any counter-argument. And I don't think he probably does. But you have seen the number of politicians from Australia to America and Northern Europe where a climate skeptic, if you want to call them such, asks the minister for, could they tell us just how much carbon dioxide naturally occurs in the atmosphere? I've never known a minister know. They don't know. They guess, and they don't know. And of course, if you ask our people, they talk about 0.0, to call it, let's 0.04% of a natural gas being relatively generous, 0.4. If we produce 1% of that, 0.04% of 1%, what on earth difference can it conceivably make? Even if you accepted the hypothesis, it cannot be done. So it makes it more expensive. Small businesses. I don't know whether you watch. Have you seen the program called Made in Britain?
No, I haven't. I've not been watching any mainstream TV. Go on.
Well, I wouldn't say it was mainstream, but it's a funny little channel. It's probably channel 24 or something. It's called Made in Britain. It's about half an hour program. We caught it by accident, and it's fascinating because what most people don't know in this country, that we are the 7th biggest manufacturing nation on earth. We are massive. We are massive manufacturing. People don't know that. People who don't understand that. 80% of that is small business. Small businesses. They make surfing boards. They make tennis rackets. They make cricket bats. All these things that go to be part of our economy. Every single one of them has to use electricity to manufacture. And of course, the more expensive it gets, the more uncompetitive they become. And this is what drives business to China and the Indian subcontinent and the Far East. You do not need the brains of an archbishop to understand all this. This is not difficult. So what is it with, I think the blame lies, I take your point, I agree with you, that it's these beastly politicians who want to pose on the world stage because they were probably bullied at school. They probably don't have a girlfriend, and this is their opportunity to get it off. So now my
if they have a girlfriend,
yeah.
If they have a girlfriend, they're probably blowing her up.
Anyway, the situation here is absolutely crazy, and it's so obviously destroyed. But what we have lost in this country, well, we've lost lots of things, which we'll come on to later, perhaps. And that is what the main thing we've lost is the free press. These people go unchallenged. But I suppose if you have the BBC, which is a state broadcasting organization, and if you don't subscribe, you go to prison. This is a free country? I doubt it. So you get people like Laura Cheeseburger and all the others, and Roger Harabin, as was, who was not a scientist, but just a political goon. You get all these people, but if you look at their salaries and their indexing pensions, they're to die for. They run into hundreds of thousands of pounds. They are not going to rock the boat. So they let all this go by, but it is the job of the press, the job of television, to expose this, to put these people on the rack, and they simply don't do this. They just don't do it. That's our shield, that's our protection. Like the principles of English law were, our constitution. All these things have been thrown away. We don't have them anymore. So we just have to sit here and vote red or blue, like they do in America. It's no different here. You vote red or blue, and that's it. And so we're just not going anywhere with it.
Well, the trouble with the media is a few years ago, like when things like Watergate were exposed, you had investigative journalism. You don't have it now because there's only 6 companies own the whole media, NBC, CBS, all the rest of them. We're in the same boat in this country. ITV, you can't trust what the media says. I think one of the most valuable things we can do, especially at our age, because I'm 65, is to talk to our friends and colleagues and get them to get on down with the kids and start using their iPads and their phones for news, because they're not going to find anything out off the TV. GB News is as good as it's going to get, and he's going old Tory boy on us because he wants to buy the Telegraph. So he's not going to blot his copybook because he'll have to be squeaky clean. So big topics aren't going to get challenged there. They'll do what they can. They're very good on cash and other things. They've got some really good hard-hitting presenters like Bev Turner and Patrick Christis and the lovely Neil Oliver, who hits it over the net every week in his monologue. But then you've got all those Tories that are working there as a second job. I mean, the other thing as well, while we're slagging him off, let's go for the jugular. Lee Anderson, the great hope for the Red Wall voters. He by gum, I'm a Tory now. I used to be Labour. You know, I used to walk down the street with ferrets in my pocket, and now here I am. I'm a blue boy. Well, what's happened with Lee? What the bloody hell's happened to Lee Anderson? Well, he's been made party vice chair. Their sole existence for that job is to make sure the Tories are liked and voted for and get in at the next election. It comes with an expense card where he can take people out to lunch and show off. Now he's got, when there was a time with Owen Paterson, this is curious, I find. Owen Paterson, I've met him a few times. I quite liked him. He's so au fait on fishing. He knew all about fishing and where we should sit with fishing with the EU. The minister that we had, some sort of like, I don't know, she probably never shaves her pubic hair. She's one of these like kiss a tree, save a whale type fishing minister. Didn't even bother to read the withdrawal agreement because she was busy with the nativity. That's right, love, get your priorities right. We've got her, and yet we have Owen Paterson, who's au fait on it all and understands it all, and he's booted out because of alleged offences that upset the Tories because of his second job where he had earned $100,000 a year. Lee Anderson was interviewed, and there was an article in the Mail that said, Lee Anderson said, if you want a job that earns another $100,000 a year, you're in the wrong job. You should be in Parliament. Look at him now at GB News earning $100,000 a year for doing a 1 hour a week show that is allowed to pre-record. He's the only presenter that's allowed to pre-record his show, allegedly so he can get back to constituents on a Friday, because his show goes out on a Friday. He's not a particularly good presenter. I think I agree with some of his policies, but there's no way I could have took that job after what I'd said about Owen Paterson. I'd sit there and I'd cringe. I'd think, oh no, I said that, but I can't do it. I can't take $100,000 a year for an hour a week, knowing full well that I slagged off Owen Paterson for doing just that, and probably Owen put more time in. He's quite an articulate person. So we've got these people that are out for themselves and trying to talk like they're one of us. And just because you've got a broad northern accent don't mean you're one of the lads. I think the ferret days are over for Lee. I think he's got a crisp little hairdo now. He looks a bit trendy, nice suits on. He's enjoying the limelight, sitting with all these lovely female journalists, and he's having a nice time. Who can blame him? But let's stop relying on politicians to put our life right. The only people that's going to put our life right is us. Me in charge of my life, you in charge of yours. The only person that can get us out of the mess is us. And the only way we're going to do it is that you and me have to talk to people down in the co-op, at the hairdressers. We have to wake them up and tell them this is not the time to say I don't do politics. This is the time to say, why don't I do politics? Because this is the Roman Empire fizzling out now. We are on the edge of it. We are watching it. We are watching the Western world be dismantled for something else we have no experience of, and that is going to have a two-tier society. And I don't want to be a slave, and slave's too dramatic. I don't want to think I get up in the morning and everything I've worked for, the Sundays I've worked, the weekends I've worked, the things I did when I was younger to save up money and pay me overdraft off with my business, all those hoops I've jumped through, I do not want to see that money squandered because some prick in Westminster decides we want to get to net zero, and I've got to suddenly try and insulate a 16th century cottage. It's madness, and everybody's angry. Everybody's angry enough. If you're that angry, do something about it, because we're slipping down the abyss.
Well, there's a couple of things I just wanted to point out. Certainly one of you know, but maybe everybody watching didn't know, that if you read your Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, as I'm sure you have, June, you'll see that the end of the Roman Empire was two things. They did two things. First, they didn't control their borders from the Goths and the Visigoths and the Huns. That was point one. And point two was they degraded their currency. They degraded the dinar, the other currencies they had from silver with alloy, so on and so forth, which is done before by other countries. But those two main things created the fall of the Roman Empire. And we're going down exactly the same route now. And the result must be exactly the same. A new dark age. And I've written articles about, I think we're going into a new dark age. And you're right, we have to look out for ourselves. We have to look out for ourselves. My responsibility now at my age is to me, my family, our horses and our Jack Russells. That's our little world in our small holding. And I'm going to do my best to go on bringing the truth out in these matters. But priority one is me and mine. Me and mine. And I'm not going to say all the details here because I know what will happen. The police will come round and knock on the door, and they've done that before. Now, there's something that you may not know, because I didn't know it until quite recently. I was on the Parliamentary Affairs Committee thing, whatever it was called, I can't remember. Armed Forces Parliamentary Committee thing, blah, blah. And I was still in office at the EU, and I had access to that committee, or that committee, or whatever it was called. I was on it. So I had my input. And it was taken, and the Duke of Edinburgh never took the chair, but he used to come and hand out gongs and stuff every now and again. What I didn't know when I actually dug into the civil service on a personal level, because I didn't know any civil servants, they're not on my social net. They're not down the wheat sheaf. They're not up at the rugby club. So civil servants only cross my path very often. But I was now dealing with mandarins. 1 and 2 star senior civil servants. And one of them explained to me, and incidentally, it wasn't in confidence. And if it was, I don't think it was a confidence. I would be prepared to break the good of the British people. And it's straight out of Sir Humphrey Bumfrey. I said, why don't you put Dr. whatever his name was, I can't remember. It doesn't matter who it was because it's 10 years ago anyway, who was a genuine expert on military affairs. And we were both part of the same RCDS background, and I won't bore anybody with the details. But he was an expert, and he was on the parliamentary committee, but he wasn't the Minister of Defence or even working as a junior Minister at Defence. And I said, how can that be that the Ministers of Defence, and here's a classic case just recently, Grant Shapps, who doesn't know anything about anything. I don't know how, if he didn't have a ministerial car, he wouldn't be able to find his way to the MOD. He's that stupid and corrupt with it, in my view, but never mind. Leaving that aside, he said, we never put a minister in, it's never done to put a minister who is an expert in his subject in that ministry. So if you're an expert on fishery, you don't get fishery when it used to be the Ministry of Fishery. If it's the Ministry of Agriculture, you do not ever put a farmer in there. If it's whatever it is, you don't get that. And you're turned around in 18 months or 2 years. So as soon as you start to learn your trade, you're moved. It's so that you can't interfere with Sir Humphrey running the country. So it doesn't matter how powerful you are, or how committed, how intelligent, you can't change anything, which is why I'll run a theory past you to see if you favour it, June, is that the incoming government should bring its own civil service. I'd get rid of the civil service. I'd get rid of the Home Office en masse now, today, this very day. I get rid of them. So an incoming government, if we could vote in a new government, what we could then do is have a civil service which was determined to carry out that policy, or Ministry of Defence determined to carry out that policy. And we both know, do we not? We know that if I was put in charge, I could stop the boat people coming in tomorrow morning. Should an incoming government bring its own civil service, its own mandarins, if you will, committed to the policy?
Yes, because where Tony Blair was really clever when he was in power, he didn't just come into power with his party and his manifesto. He changed the civil service. Most of the people in the civil service are Blairites. Professor Neil Ferguson, government advisor, a Blairite. Ollie Robbins, a Blairite. They're all Blairites, the ones with the power base. And you've only got to look at Ian Duncan Smith, who came up with the idea for the one-stop universal credit. It's a good idea so that people could go and see one advisor, tell them everything they needed from housing benefit to income, and get all the benefits covered under one visit or one form filling exercise. But it was actually buggered up by the implementation by the civil service, because the civil service didn't want it to work. It was their fault everything was delayed. It was their fault people were waiting 5 and 6 weeks for money. You don't do that to people who are living hand to mouth. So the civil service, Blairite civil service, knew exactly what they were doing. And of course, the Tories and Duncan Smith took the heat for that. But it really was the implementation by the civil service. This goes on a lot. It goes on all the time. So, in fact, years ago, Godfrey, I was involved with a blog, and he said, well, the most powerful man in the country is Tony Blair. And I went, yeah, well, he used to be the Prime Minister. No, I said, it's nothing to do with being the Prime Minister. The most powerful man, the man who still has the most influence, is Tony Blair. And I think he's right. And now we know more about the Tony Blair Institute. And if you look down with the lockdowns, the Tony Blair Institute proudly announced to the nation, or to the world, on Twitter, that they were embedded in governments across the world to advise on restrictions. Now, that is an immensely powerful position. And when that word embedded is used with governments, it means that they're already in the government. So basically, there must be some civil service people who are also members of the Tony Blair Institute, which isn't a good look, is it? So that's an enormously powerful position. So you wonder why all the countries did all the same thing at the same time, because the advice was coming from the same place, the Tony Blair Institute. That's how powerful this man is. He's never gone away. He is, I think he's been more influential out of power than when he was in, or at least equally.
I would agree, because it also follows in the Crown Prosecution Service and the Supreme Court. They're all Blairites. And I made this point when I was, I can't remember, I was being interviewed a little while ago by somebody, and I said, it's like we're all on a train where everybody on the train wants to go to Scarborough. And the train, the driver and the signalman and the guard want to go to Manchester. And of course, you're going to end up in Manchester. You're not going to go to Scarborough because you're on a train that isn't going there. So you can wave your arms and shout and complain. The driver, and of course, that's where we are. And of course, it's WEF, because we know that Tony Blair, his seed corn, was the World Economic Forum. He got these jobs, and then he got to make it now he's now one of the richest men of the world. And of course, like Clinton's and like Bill Gates set up these huge tax avoidance schemes, which are trusts, pro bono publico, and all this kind of thing, which they're not. They're just billions and billions of dollars, which they can hide with no shareholder responsibility and send money to anybody they like. So the whole scheme is rancid with corruption. And of course, here's the sad thing, we know, do we not? I have actual subscribers who are of the opinion that Klaus Schwab now is number 2 to the king. I always used to think that Klaus Schwab was the top man, and Jug Ears was really just a bit of a lemon who went along with it because he's was bullied at Gordonston, wasn't selected for the rugby side, bit of a clown, and that's what I used to think. I'm not altogether sure that's true now. People have said, just look how this is panning out. And his speeches that he makes, that we need some sort of military style. If you actually look at the stuff he says, he is a very dangerous man. And I'm concerned that we have somebody who has to give a session because people don't always understand how it works. He has to sign it off. Let's take the WHO, the World Health Organization, to hand that over is totally and utterly against our constitution, and it's against his coronation oath. He has to sign that off. There is no, the House of Lords, our amending chamber, aren't doing anything about it. The Commons aren't doing anything about it. He signs it off. So again, a coach and horses have gone through our constitution, our principles of English law, and everything else. And we sit here, but we're supposed to be protected from all this. We're supposed to be protected, and just it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Everybody, it seems to me, is a small. Perhaps, Jim, what's your view? Was it ever thus? Was it always the Rothschilds? Was it always the sort of behind-the-scenes, shady, dodgy dealers, the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation? Perhaps it was always like this, and it's only because it's become over. They now just don't care if we know.
Well, I think what's happened, I think it's probably always been like this, but general things haven't been threatened as much, and we've not had the facility to investigate. For instance, what the parliamentarians can't seem to grasp is you can't pull the wool over our eyes anymore, because if they were pulling the wool over our eyes in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, you had to read a paper to find out otherwise. And depending on the paper, depended on the slant. On the right, it was either Tory or Labour. That's the only access we had. And if we wanted to complain, we had to lick a stamp and post it off. Not even everybody had phones. So if you think what's happened, what they can't get used to, what they're not understanding is with the internet and social media, we have the power to investigate. You don't have to be intelligent to press a keyboard. All you have to do is ask the right questions. And then we have the facility to share it with thousands of people quickly. Twitter's amazed me. It's a bit of a bear pit, but I hold my own. But it's amazed me how quick Twitter is with anything. And now that Elon Musk owns it, I don't care what his end goal is. I don't necessarily trust him. But we have to make hay while the sun shines. The home of free speech, as far as we want politically, about general subjects, is Twitter. It's not YouTube, definitely not. It's not Google. It's not Apple. It's not Facebook. It's Twitter. And we've got this facility. Someone like me who's never left a house particularly, I don't mean I'm agoraphobic. I mean, I don't go out and about, but I can sit down. I'm reasonably intelligent enough to read something. And if I don't understand it, I'll pass it by these experts I've met along the way. I've got, WhatsApp groups with epidemiologists, doctors, lawyers. If I need to tap into a line of information, the people are there. So I tap in and say, what do you think of this? And they'll come back to me, well, I think it's X. And that will give me an idea on how to put it across to the public. So someone like me can do that with 116,000 followers and another 165,000 followers on Facebook. I reached last month on Twitter 29 million people. 29 million people saw my tweets in 28 days. Now, I work for a newspaper that had a 5-story building, 22 company cars, 11 vans, 300 employees to reach 58,000 people every night. So when you think of that, that is enormous. That is an enormous gift that we've got. We've got the gift to communicate and share, and we should use it against them, because for now we've got it. And the more people that know, people are waking up. What we can do about it, sadly, I think what it would need for the elite to back off out of our lives is everybody down's tools, don't do anything. I've never said that in my life. But if everything stops, but while they have people willing to appease them, like people who work on the super yachts, and there's so many people in a powerful position, but we're not using the power. And the power isn't necessarily being outspoken. Imagine if you couldn't get staff for your super yacht, but everybody didn't turn up. Nobody's there to man the engines, wipe the decks down, create the food. Nobody turns up for the super yachts. The pilots walk away from the private jets. The stewardesses don't turn up. Hit them where it hurts. You don't have to. We have an immense power, but it's not tapped into, because we could affect change, because they need us to be elite. You can't be elite because they don't want to clean their own toilets. They don't want to set the rubbish out. They don't want to walk their own dogs. We could withdraw from those services. And that's just the first tier of resistance. That's where we can make an effect. Imagine your £300 million yacht and nobody's prepared to work on it for you. But we'd need to stick together for that. And we fall out on our own side. I don't know how that would be done.
One of the problems, I was last winter, I wanted to see if I could get up to speed on things I didn't understand, because I understand the climate argument, I understand the economic, I understand the military, all these things I've had personal experience of as an old geezer. I've been there and I've had it, I've done it all, I've seen it all firsthand. What I couldn't get to the bottom of was the concept of cognitive dissonance. And so I applied to do an online, at length, whatever you call these things, Smithsonian Institute psychology course, which I plowed through all winter I went through it, 25 lectures, and books and bits and pieces. So every dark, miserable night, I soldiered on through this, which was a waste of time because I'm no further forward now than when I started the actual lecture. But the one thing they did tell me, or it did tell me, was that 80% of people go with the flow. The herd instinct is that 80%, we are not representative of the people or the electorate. But there are still hospitals now. There are Warwick Hospital just the other day, you can't go in without a mask. So
where is thinking? It's crazy. I had to have a dog put down during lockdown, and just before he died, as he was failing, he was 16, I had to take him to my vet. Decent woman. Surgery is a terraced house on the end of a row that's on a main road on the A6. And they wouldn't let me come in with the dog. It was for a blood test. So I had to hand him over in the street. He's not well. And then they did the blood test and brought him back out. So I had my consultation, which was a rip-off, because I think vets are a cartel. Let's not go down that road. And it's the insurance, pet insurance, that's to blame. So I get my dog back. She comes out, the vet, with a lavender-coloured silk face mask over her ears with a big dirty stain here. It's damp. We're in the street. You can hardly hear each other for traffic. And she's telling me, and the mask is blowing in and out. And I'm looking at this woman, and I said to her, "Take your mask off." And she just looked at me. And I said, "I can't believe a woman with your qualifications is even numb enough, one, to wear it, it's filthy, and wear it in the street where I can't hear what you're saying." Eventually, within about 10 days, my dog died, but I went to a different vet because they wouldn't come and put him to sleep at home because of COVID. The options were they can put him to sleep in the back of my car on this busy junction, They can put him on a trestle table outside. It was February. I didn't want that after 16 years of being by my side every day. Or that's it. They won't let me come in the surgery for the final moments of that dog's life. So I contacted another vet who came to the house. They did wear masks, but on that day, I wasn't even interested in arguing with them. They came in. Robbie was put to sleep on his sheepskin, looking on the garden that he'd run around for the last 16 years, and that's the way I wanted to treat my pet. How can a vet with her qualifications stand there and seriously talk to me with a filthy, dirty, single-ply silk mask on? It looked like knickers. She obviously thought it was pretty. This is just where...
My wife is an equine physiotherapist. She left the National Health, and then she specialised in private practice, and then she's horsey. And she specializes in equine physiotherapy. And she was disgusted with vets. There's two professions, vets and clergy, who abrogated their entire responsibility. But there's an interesting thing. When I was a guest lecturer at Cambridge University on Austrian School Economics, that would have been about 89, I think, 1989 or something like that. It doesn't matter. It was around about that time. And I was speaking to one of the faculty of the veterinary school, because she was already lecturing at the Liverpool Veterinary School and Glasgow and some foreign ones. I got chatting to some guy, and he said, oh, would she come and talk to us about equine physiotherapy at Cambridge? And so she went down to give a lecture at Cambridge. And it came to question time. She'd gone through the whole thing, she did case studies and the whole thing, as you would expect. Do you know what the first question from third-year vets were? What the first question from third-year vets was? How does the fee system work? Do you charge the vet, or do you charge the patient? These kids are 21 and 22 years old, and they were. There's no vocation in veterinary science anymore. It's not vocational. It's how much money can I make? They've all sold out, all the little vets. And we go on watching All Creatures Great and Small, don't we? Stop being like that 50 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, we now have a local practice. I'm a country bumpkin area here. It's hunting, shooting and fishing. And we have a veterinarian practice. It's a beautiful building. It's a barn conversion, stone built. Must be worth a fortune. And they only do small animals. They don't do, in this area, they only do small animals. They don't do farming. And they do horses. They have a horse vet. But that's because the money's in the small animals, because we'll do what we want. I was in my vet's one day waiting for my dog to come out. I ended up with a diabetic dog, the one I rescued from Liverpool, that dog. We used to call it the £1 million dog. But we managed to get another 9 or 10 years out of it as a diabetic dog, insulin twice a day, never missed an injection. And I had to go for these various checkups in order for me to get my prescription. I only paid for the prescription at the vet, and I bought the insulin online because it was half the price. My vet didn't like me doing it, but she couldn't refuse. Anyway, while I'm sat there, there's a woman in with a biggish dog. She's waiting for it to come out, and she picks a toy up off the counter, and it was an expensive dog toy, £7.95. It's a number of years ago. And I thought, Jesus, that's expensive. And when the dog came out, the girls on the keyboard, she said, X amount for the whatever it was, 190 quid plus the pet toy. And she said, yeah, it's PDSA, which is the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals. And they put the pet toy on the PDSA bill. So I was sat watching this, and I said, excuse me, is that toy going on that bill? Because I give to this charity, I give 20 quid a month to this so people can afford to see a vet for the dog because they're poor. I'm not doing it so they can pay quid on a toy that I'll get for £3 somewhere else. And there was a bit of kerfuffle, and the woman put the toy back, even though it was full of dog saliva by then. But that's because the insurance element of it and the charity work of it, it's like a cartel. As you say, the James Herriot days have gone. They don't exist. It's a money-making. A friend of mine studying to be a veterinary nurse, and they have these meetings and seminars, and part of the thing is how to enhance, once they come in for a consultation, how to get them back for a second consult, how to make sure that the drugs are charged up at the right price. Dreadful.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.